suggests, although it hasn't been published yet, even if it's already stopped, because we need to know. We can't just hope.
Megan McArdle is with The Atlantic. Her piece is in the November issue. We'll go to the House of Representatives.
House will be in order. The chair lays before the House a communication from the Speaker.
The Speaker's Rooms, Washington, D.C., October 26, 2011. I hereby appoint the Honorable Chip Kravac to act as Speaker pro tempore on this day. Signed, John A. Boehner, Speaker of the House of Representatives.
Pursuant to order of the House of January 5, 2011, the Chair will now recognize members from the list submitted by the majority and minority leaders for morning hour debate. The Chair will alternate recognition between the parties, with each party limited to 1 hour, and each other of the majority and the minority leaders and the majority whip limited to 5 minutes each. But in no event shall the event continue beyond 11:50 a.m. The Chair recognizes the gentleman from Oregon, Mr. Braunbauer, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is a special moment for American agriculture, as well as an opportunity to address the major challenges America faces: our long-term government spending, our budget deficit, environmental protection, health problem of our families. It's also key to improving the economy, which should be our #1 priority. Helping more people at less cost by reducing subsidies to large agribusiness also speaks directly to the frustrations of protesters from coast to coast, whether they are occupying Wall Street or they're Tea Party protesters. Now, there's no doubt that America's massive investment in farm support, hundreds of billions of dollars of taxpayer money, the special rules and regulations, and tariff protections have all contributed to the success of American agriculture. It's boosted productivity and made a difference in providing plentiful, low-cost food. Left unaddressed is whether this expensive patchwork of complicated and excessive programs is the best we can do. The answer from independent analysts is overwhelming. We can do far better for less money and help more farmers and ranchers, and especially those Americans in need of food. Today I'm releasing a report entitled Growing Opportunities: Family Farm Values for Reforming the Farm Bill, which brings together that big picture and illustrates a better way. The core principles are to reduce the flow of money to the largest agribusiness interests, which shortchanges the majority of farmers and ranchers who receive virtually no assistance from direct commodity payments, the expensive web of programs to shield farmers from market forces, and, of course, the unusual program of crop insurance, which pays more to insurance agents than to farmers. It would instead concentrate it for people who need help the most, make healthy food more affordable, and give assistance to new farmers that is so necessary to deal with the turnover in American agriculture, where the average farmer is 55 years of age. It would stop the inappropriate and expensive subsidization which compromises our international trade responsibilities, which not only gives these large agribusinesses a leg up, but helps them get bigger at the expense of small and medium-sized farmers and ranchers. It would stop the insanity of giving $1.5 billion to Brazilian cotton farmers over the next 10 years because we don't have the courage and the political will to stop giving support to American cotton farmers, which has been deemed illegal. We must make the production of food, not commodities, more affordable and more nutritious for all Americans, but particularly for our students, our young families, and the elderly. Redirecting money away from incentives to pollute and paying more to farmers and ranchers to protect water quality and wildlife habitat will give real benefit to American communities who are the neighbors of our farmers. It fits our economic and recreational opportunities, reduces the cost of cleanup of our waterways from animal waste, pesticides, and fertilizers. Help with research, marketing, and environmental protection will allow our farmers to be more productive and better stewards of the land while putting money in their pockets. in turn increasing benefits and reducing costs for everybody else. Now, I don't pretend this report contains any silver bullet. It's a collection of what I've learned dealing with these issues in my 15 years in Congress, but more important, spending a lot of time with Oregon farmers and ranchers, people in the nursery industry, the vintners, who are shortchanged by the current system and deserve better. Joining me in the release of this report are representatives from people who advocate on behalf of the taxpayers, who deal with deficit spending, who are environmental advocates, and people who care deeply about America's farmers and ranchers. There is, across this country, a grand coalition that is forming and coalescing behind a unified vision for American agriculture at exactly the time when the taxpayers need it, most farmers and ranchers deserve it, and advocates on behalf of better health and nutrition for all Americans demand it. Thank you, and I yield back. I would seek unanimous consent to include this material.
Without objection. So ordered. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Dole, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I came to this body as a small business owner, someone that employs just under 100 people. For me, that's 100 families. I decided to run for Congress because it felt to me as if the federal government was making it harder and harder for me to put the key in the door and open up my business each and every day. And frankly, they should be doing quite the opposite. We here in this body should be making it easier for American businesses to grow their businesses, to be able to hire more people, to invest back in their business and grow. I am pleased to say that we have an opportunity this week to vote on some legislation that's a bipartisan piece of legislation to end some of the barriers that are preventing businesses from investing back in their businesses. We're going to have an opportunity to vote on H.R. 674, which would repeal a provision that would force government entities to withhold 3% from the vendors that they do business with. Earlier this year, we took care of some legislation that was some overburdensome regulation on 1099s for small businesses. This was going to be paperwork that was going to, in essence, cost small businesses hundreds of thousands of dollars, and in some cases millions of dollars, just to comply. Just to cross the T's and dot the I's, not a single bit would be added to their bottom line or would be helping provide services to consumers. There's no question that this bill would help small businesses. It would also help governments, municipalities that would be forced to withhold. This withholding requirement is particularly harmful to small businesses, to contractors, and would undermine our efforts to spur job creation. This requirement needlessly ties up cash flow of small businesses, and that's exactly what we don't need to do at this particular time. This is a common sense piece of legislation, and I'm confident that we're able to pass it. We've got over 269 co-sponsors today. Mr. Speaker, the gentleman that was just up here is in fact the lead co-sponsor, Mr. Blumenauer, with my colleague Wally Harger from California. It enjoys broad bipartisan support. It's common sense legislation. We do not need to be taking dollars out of the economy at this point in time. It increases costs for goods and services. It increased the burdens on administrative requirements. It increased the cost for record keeping. This is another instance of unintended consequences of legislation, and ones that I think we cannot afford. We must focus on how we can help small businesses across this land. We in this body need to create an environment where small businesses can have more certainty. Because when I talk to businesses all across the 10th District of Illinois, the one thing I hear over and over and over again is that the uncertainty out there is preventing people from investing in their business, from moving forward. This would be yet one more burden. We don't need to do that. So I'm pleased to see that members on both sides of the aisle are coming together to try to solve some of these issues. It's certainly what the American public is looking for us to do, to be able to find some common ground to move forward so that we can eliminate some of these barriers. The number one issue we face, without exception, is jobs in the economy. So it seemed like common sense to me that we try to enable small businesses to be able to have the tools necessary to forecast, to invest in their businesses, and to grow. With 29 million small businesses in our nation, if we can create an environment where half of those businesses can create a single job, think about where we'd be then. We've got 9.1% unemployment in our country. In Illinois, it's at 10. In certain areas, even in the 10th district, we've got unemployment of 20 to 22%. We've been just recognized as the #1 manufacturing district in the country. We've lost 750,000 manufacturing jobs in Illinois. We have to step up and allow small businesses to be able to invest back in their businesses and to grow. I'm delighted to see that last week we were able to come together 2 weeks ago on trade legislation to be able to help those manufacturers, to help farmers, to be able to increase exports and grow jobs right here in America. This is exactly the efforts that we need to do. So I want to encourage my colleagues on both sides of the aisles to come together on H.R. 674 to help small businesses move forward and get America back to work. With that, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Shimkus. Gentleman from Indiana, my correction, Mr. Donnelly, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, today I pay tribute to an outstanding citizen of South Bend, Indiana, Mayor Steve Lickey, who devoted his life to the service of our community. Raised in Freeport, Illinois, Mayor Lickey made South Bend his home over 30 years ago after graduating from Fordham University. He and his beloved wife, Peg, the marketing director for the South Bend Museum of Art, have 4 children they are so proud of. Steve has been South Bend's 31st and longest-serving mayor in the city's history. He took office in 1997, succeeding Joe Kernan, who became the lieutenant governor. And now in his 4th term, Mayor Lickey has championed the development of a city in which all residents can be proud to live and work. Previously, Steve served 9 years as a member of the South Bend Common Council, including 2 terms as president, representing the 1st District on South Bend's northwest side. South Bend, under his leadership, has become a hub of technological diversity. Mayor Lickey spearheaded the demolition of nearly 4 million square feet of obsolete buildings in the former Studebaker corridor and strengthened partnerships with leading community institutions, including the University of Notre Dame. These efforts have come together as South Bend created Indiana's first dual-site, state-certified technology park, consisting of Innovation Park at Notre Dame and Ignition Park on the grounds of the former Studebaker Corporation. In addition, South Bend became the first U.S. city to create a broadband network, the Metronet, using its own traffic conduit. As the owner of a small construction company, Steve took interest in neighborhood restoration, infrastructure improvements, and the revitalization of our city. Among other projects, he fostered the public-private restoration of the Performing Arts Center, the Palais Royal Ballroom, the Northeast Neighborhood Revitalization, and the renovation of the former natatorium into the Indiana University South Bend Civil Rights Heritage Center. Under his leadership, South Bend received a White House designation in 2008 as a Preserve America community. He also directed the completion of the Riverwalk along the St. Joe River and added 50 miles of bicycle lanes and routes throughout our city. He has served on the advisory board for Indiana University South Bend during a period of expansion and growth that positioned it as an active participant in the economic development of our region. Enrollment growth at Ivy Tech Community College has exploded and has led to a partnership between the city's Redevelopment Commission and the college as the commission acquires and relocates businesses to help expand the campus of Ivy Tech even more. With concern for the future, Mayor Lickey's vision has helped provide the spark for several environmental efforts that led to South Bend's designation as Indiana's Green Community of the Year in 2009. Our city has developed into an innovative, dynamic, and progressive place, and in 2011 it was named an All-American City. Mayor Steve's progressive vision, collaborative leadership, and passionate advocacy for good government earned him the 2011 Association of Cities and Towns Russell Lloyd Distinguished Service Award. He is also the 2011-2012 IACT President. So today, on behalf of all of the citizens of South Bend, Indiana, I want to thank Mayor Steve for his years of unselfish dedication to the city and to its people. You will never be forgotten. Thank you for everything. Thank you, Mayor, and God bless you and Peg and your family. With that, Mr. Speaker, I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Shimkus, for 5 minutes. So, without objection, so ordered. Gentleman's recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The third time on the floor to talk about high-level nuclear waste and Yucca Mountain. I started talking about Hanford, which is in Washington State, comparing it to the Yucca facility. In Hanford, 53 million gallons of nuclear waste, 0 at Yucca. Nuclear waste stored 10 feet underground in Hanford. Waste would be stored 1,000 feet underground in Yucca. Waste 1,000 feet from the water table at Yucca, 250 feet from the water table. At Yucca, the nuclear waste would be 100 miles from the nearest river. At Hanford, it's 1 mile from the nearest river. So what are the Senator's position on Yucca Mountain in Washington State and Oregon, knowing that we have 53 million gallons of high-level nuclear waste 1 mile from the Columbia River? Senator Cantwell is not supportive of Yucca Mountain. Senator Murray is supportive, at least in her public statements. Senator Wyden is not supportive. And Senator Merkley is silent. They should not be silent. A couple weeks ago, I then moved to my home state of Illinois and the Zion Nuclear Decommissioned Power Plant that still has high-level nuclear waste on site. Again, the same statistics for Yucca are there in a desert away from a river. Zion is on Lake Michigan. Zion has 65 casks containing 1,135 metric tons of nuclear waste. Waste stored above ground, 5 feet above the water table, 1,300 feet from Lake Michigan. So what do the senators from the two states, and Wisconsin has 2 nuclear power plants also on Lake Michigan. Well, Senator Durbin is supportive of Yucca Mountain. Senator Kirk is supportive of Yucca Mountain. Senator Cole is supportive of Yucca Mountain. Senator Johnson is still silent on Yucca Mountain. I imagine we'll know soon. Now we move to Georgia and South Carolina. Look at the difference here. Savannah River has 6,300 canisters of waste, nuclear waste on site. The waste is stored right below the ground. It is 0 to 160 feet above the water table, and it's right next to the Savannah River. Again, compare that to Yucca Mountain. No nuclear waste. Waste would be stored 1,000 feet underground, 1,000 feet above the water table, and 100 miles from the Colorado River. So where are these senators from Georgia and South Carolina? Well, Senator Isaacson says we need to retain Yucca Mountain as our nation's high-level waste repository. What does Senator Chambliss, so he supports. Senator Chambliss says we have long advocated that the Department of Energy immediately halt all actions to dismantle operations at Yucca Mountain. He supports. Senator Graham. No one should be required to pay for an empty hole in the Nevada desert. The decision by the Obama administration to close Yucca Mountain was ill-advised and leaves our nation without a disposal plan for spent nuclear fuel or Cold War waste. That's what Hanford is, Cold War nuclear waste from our weapons sector. What does Senator DeMint say? Without Yucca Mountain, America will not have safe and secure place to permanently store nuclear waste, and instead waste will pile up at existing reactors. We will continue, and I will continue to come down on the floor and go through the nation highlighting high-level nuclear waste all over this country when the federal law under the Nuclear Waste Policy Act of 1982 says we should have one site. And the law says that site is Yucca Mountain. And so as we continue to go through the states, hopefully some senators will get off the dime
and state their positions, culminating to 60 senators in support as we move this forward and this nation forward to a more secure location for high-level nuclear waste, away from lakes, away from rivers, away from the groundwater tables. There's no safer place on the planet than underneath a mountain in a desert, and that place is Yucca Mountain. With that, I yield back my time.
The gentleman yields back. The chair recognizes the gentleman from New York, Mr. Rangel, for 5 minutes. Without objection so ordered, the gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you. It appeared sometime yesterday that the Congressional Budget Office looked at statistically where the wealth of this country was being held and came to the conclusion that 1% of Americans, high earners, have 42% of the nation's wealth. It also pointed out that 1 out of every 5 kids, American kids, are born into poverty. Well, certainly one might look at the income tax system to see whether or not this disparity is being dealt with. But if you do, you will find out that we have aggressively protected income from people who are wealthy enough to invest it at lower rates than lower income people who work hard every day and yet have a higher rate of their income that they have paid taxes on. What does this unfairness mean? Well, one thing I can tell you is that you're not going to have too much noise from the spiritual community, because somehow their silence as we deal with the question of budget deficits and budget cuts, they haven't responded to the fact that many of these cuts has to deal with income after retirement with Social Security. Others deal with the ability to pay for health care. Others just deal with the plight of not being able to put food on the table, to get health care. In other words, it's all biblical as to what is wrong about the disparities in income. But there's other things that we don't talk about that you can rest assured that this includes some of the benefits that the 1% has. Why is it that we know, or that we can suspect, that in this war where we lost so many lives, that so many people have been wounded, that our brave men and women coming home will subject themselves to a lack of funds to deal with their physical and mental problems, and yet we somehow know that that 1% was not involved in defending our great nation. Oh, we take it for granted that those people who can't get jobs would volunteer. But we can almost know without any investigation that the wealthiest of Americans never found themselves protecting our flag. What else can we tell? Well, we can tell there's a limited amount of money that billionaires can spend. And we don't expect them to be at the local supermarket or buying a pair of socks or going to the drugstore looking for prescriptions. No, they hold on to their money. They invest their money. They don't even loan their money. But having said that, one thing is clear, that if we have the other 99% of the people that are not wealthy, and if it was possible for them to get a fairer shake and have more expendable income, you wouldn't have to put out ads for them to buy, that they have the needs and that they would be purchasing. And small businesses depend on these people, not the barons, not the tycoons, but they depend on the people in the neighborhood. That's why the stores are located. So it's not a question of not having consumer confidence. It's a question of consumers not having the money to buy what they need. But I really think that the worst thing of all, when we just overlook and don't pay attention to that, It's the American dream that's being shattered. Because we do know that poverty means that you're not going to have good health. You're not going to get the type of education to get out of poverty. Poverty means that you lose the hope and the dreams of this great nation. And more than poverty and wealth, what really is the engine that makes our nation so great is people from all over the world believes that you can make it in the United States of America. But when you are now going through decades of poverty, kids not able to go to college, those that graduate not able to find jobs, our young people and older alike running to the streets and protesting, explosion of this type occurring all over the great United States, then the hopes and dreams that are the engine that makes our country so great are limited in their ability to bring the scientists and the doctors and the people we need for this country. 1% of our wage earners, 42% of the nation's wealth. There is something wrong with that formula.
The gentleman yields back. Chair recognizes the gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Whittle, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You know, Mr. Speaker, you probably get the same questions I get when I go back home. It's from folks who came and they sat here in the gallery and they looked down the House floor and they thought, golly, where is everybody? Where is everybody? I thought it was going to be full of 435 members of Congress. But, of course, as you know, Mr. Speaker, in today's modern technology world, everybody's back in their office watching things on television. But I confess that sometimes during this morning hour, I turn the volume down a little bit. I turn it down a little bit because sometimes we get into those divisive issues down here on the House floor. It gets my blood pressure up so much I think my head's going to explode first thing in the morning. I sometimes turn the volume down. But today I want to come down here and find those things, Mr. Speaker, that bring us together as opposed to divide us. Because I really do believe that as we face the kind of economic challenges that we're facing in America today, there is more that unites this body than that divides it. There is more that we can do together than we must fight about in order to move the American dream forward. I have in my pocket a card. It's titled the House Republican Job Plan, Mr. Speaker, but I'd tell you it's an American job plan. I look down the items that we've brought forward in this Republican House, America's House, the things that they've been able to pass the United States Senate, those things that have gone to the President's desk, and we are making progress, Mr. Speaker, on those things that unite us. Of course, we started the year off repealing the 1099 provision from the President's health care bill, that onerous provision that required new paperwork mandates on all of our small businesses, completely unworkable. We came together, House and Senate, and the President repealed that. Last week, we came and we passed 3 new free trade agreements. 3 new free trade agreements for this nation. Mr. Speaker, as you know, with every nation that America has a free trade agreement, we have a manufacturing surplus. Hear that, Mr. Speaker. With every nation with which we have a free trade agreement, we have a manufacturing trade surplus. We ship more American-made goods to those countries than we import. We have a trade deficit as a nation, but a manufactured goods surplus with the nations with which we sign free trade agreements. Free trade agreements, good for America, good for jobs, good for trade, and we were able to move those across the President's desk with his signature last week, 2 weeks ago now. And this week, we're going to bring 2 more bills to the floor, things that bring us together. You heard my colleague from Illinois talk about earlier this morning, the 3% withholding, a bill that we passed to say we think there's lots of tax cheats going on out there among folks who contract with the government, so we're going to just withhold those taxes up front and make you get them back later on. Well, it turns out 3% withholding, our small business owners didn't even have a 3% margin, Mr. Speaker. If we had held all that money, they couldn't even pay the bills. They'd actually have to operate at a loss for the year and ask the government back in April for their refund. The President's on board with that repeal. I believe the House is going to be on board with that repeal. The Senate's going to be on board with that repeal. We're going to move that across the floor this week as well. Things that are bringing us together, Mr. Speaker, common ground that we can cover to make it easier to create jobs in this country. Because I agree with my colleague, Mr. Rangel. The American dream is that you can come here and do better tomorrow than you did today, that you can provide your kids with more opportunity than what you had. That is the American dream. I don't worry that folks want to come to America. I worry about the one day that that dream has disappeared and folks don't want to come to America anymore. They'd rather take their big brain and their hard work ethic to China or to India or Brazil or Argentina. We must preserve America as the magnet of success, the magnet that attracts those who want to improve their lives and believe those opportunities exist here. You know, Mr. Speaker, there's a commonality in all of those bills that we've passed and sent to the President's desk this year. It's that these were things the government did to try to encourage compliance, to try to regulate, to try to require that small businesses operate differently, and what we found out is they didn't work. 1099 provision, free trade, those tariffs and duties that prevented that free trade, this 3% withholding provision. What's the common ground there, Mr. Speaker? It's that the Congress is doing too much in regulating. America is doing too much in regulating this country. I ran on that premise, Mr. Speaker, that the challenge is not that we are doing too little. The problem is that we are doing too much and burdening those small businesses. You know, the former Soviet bloc countries, Mr. Speaker, have learned from that example. They have flat tax rates, no exemptions, no exceptions, and their tax collections went up. Mr. Speaker, folks can't pay taxes if they don't have a job. You can't pay income taxes if you don't have a job, and you can't have a job if you don't have opportunity in your society. The fair tax, Mr. Speaker, H.R. 25 goes right to the heart of these jobs issues, repealing those burdensome taxes, repealing those regulations, and making sure everybody gets a fair shake, because that's what America's all about. Mr. Speaker, I appreciate the time.
And the gentleman yields back. Chair recognizes the gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Connolly, for 5 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, there are 14 million Americans out of work. They need jobs. This economy needs jobs. Unfortunately, jobs have not been the focus for the House Republican leadership thus far. While private sector job growth has dwindled, House Republicans have repeatedly placed partisanship above policy. It's time, long past time, we vote on a jobs bill. The President's America Jobs Act contains a number of important jobs initiatives which have traditionally enjoyed bipartisan support. Tax cut for businesses, tax cuts for workers, tax cuts to employ veterans, and investments in critically needed infrastructure in this country. Unfortunately, the Senate Republicans voted to kill this job creator, and the House Republican leadership hasn't even brought it up for debate. Today, however, we have a small opportunity to help small businesses and provide them with greater predictability by repealing the burdensome 3% withholding requirement on government contractors, vendors, farmers, and Medicare providers. The President has called for its repeal, and this is a bipartisan bill supported by many of us on both sides of the aisle. The 3% withholding regulation became law under President Bush in 2005 in a Republican Congress. The original intent may have been to ensure tax compliance among a very small number of bad actors, yet the sledgehammer approach that was adopted is creating far more challenges than the problem we're trying to solve. Since then, a number of bipartisan efforts have delayed its implementation, but temporary measures at best leave businesses uncertain and wary about future investment. My district here in the National Capital Region is probably home to more federal contractors than any other in Congress, and I routinely hear from them about this issue everywhere I go. They report that the 3% withholding will unduly restrict their cash flows, increase project bond costs, and imperil their ability to expand and create jobs. In addition, this burdensome regulation won't just harm the private sector. It actually hurts state and local governments that contract with private companies subject to the withholding requirement. I know from my experience as chairman of the Fairfax County Board of Supervisors that this regulation would create an accounting nightmare for our local and state partners. An estimated 20% of counties throughout the country have more than $100 million in annual expenditures that would be subject to this withholding. As county chairman of such a jurisdiction, I work diligently with an open RFP process to ensure the lowest cost and value for our taxpayers. This will be an administrative nightmare for state and local governments, which would be forced to undergo the collection and forwarding of the unnecessary withholding to the IRS. The cost of the Department of Defense to be compliant with this regulation would have to withhold more than $17 billion from private companies every year. Furthermore, many businesses subject to the requirement would either have to increase their bids or stop bidding on projects with local governments. Either way, whether competition is limited or prices are increased, counties would be forced to pay higher costs to vendors, further burdening local taxpayers at a time they can't afford it. We need to partner with the private sector to spur economic growth and recovery from this recession. This regulation would serve only as a roadblock to that effort. The Government Withholding Relief Coalition represents more than 140 trade associations, state and local governments, and stated that the total cost of the 3% regulation would be $75 billion over 5 years. Repealing it today will provide businesses with greater predictability and remove undue government intrusion into their operations. With greater predictability, America's businesses will be better able to invest in job creation. We can provide that predictability today. I urge my colleagues to vote to support small businesses and vote for H.R. 674. I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Pennsylvania, Mr. Fitzpatrick, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. There's much debate on the floor of this House about the plight of the uninsured, and we need more discussion about health care solutions, and we need more praise for those health care professionals in our communities who do the hard work of providing health care for the poor and the uninsured without government mandate and without government involvement. I rise today to honor the 20th anniversary of the Mother Bachman Maternity Center, which is part of St. Mary Medical Center in Langhorne, Bucks County. For over 2 decades, the Mother Bachman Center has been providing women of Bucks County with the health care they need, regardless of their ability to pay. Certified nurse midwives provide obstetrical care to women who are uninsured and are underinsured. Women who would otherwise go without quality medical care during their pregnancy have access to a wide range of services, including nutrition education, financial counseling, and prenatal and delivery care. The Mother Bachman Center is also able to partner with Catholic Social Services in order to identify patients at risk for postpartum depression and to offer them social support and important counseling services. This center aims to provide a continuum of care to new mothers and their families who are in need. St. Mary and its partners offer emergency housing in 10 local apartments where families receive financial counseling, parenting skills instruction, and computer education to help them in their search for employment. The Mother Bachman Center also offers confidential domestic violence evaluations and resource referrals in partnership with a local nonprofit agency that helps women and helps families in crisis. This center is just one part of a larger group of community programs, including Children's Health Center and the Family Resource Center that serve expecting and new mothers of Bucks County through St. Mary Medical Center. The Mother Bachman Center is a prime example of charitable organizations and community groups coming together to address an important issue with effective local solutions. St. Mary Medical Center, with this center, has provided the community of Bucks County with an alternative to handouts from the state, local, or federal government. These types of programs not only provide quality health care services, but they also empower women to take charge of their pregnancies and navigate their first trials as a new mother. And so as this Congress continues to debate issues of health care and the proper role of the government in the industry, I urge my colleagues to look at this center as a model for efficient, community-based solutions. Thomas Jefferson once said that health is worth more than learning. It is true, but we can all learn from projects like the Mother Bachman Maternity Center about what it takes and how to provide health and health care for our most at-risk constituents. And so, Mr. Speaker, I'm proud to rise today to honor the Mother Bachman Maternity Center as it celebrates 20 years of providing families in need with important health and human services. I yield back.
The chair now recognizes the gentlelady from Ohio, Ms. Kaptur, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This week marks the 82nd anniversary of Black Thursday, the start of the great stock market crash of 1929. On that day, rampant Wall Street speculation that had characterized the Roaring '20s came to an abrupt end. Our country learned many valuable lessons about the banking system and took action to contain the severe risks of an unregulated banking system. This body passed the Banking Act of 1933, commonly called Glass-Steagall, named after the lead sponsors of the bill. Well, from the shape of our economy today, it appears the U.S. forgot important lessons of economic behavior. The banking system we have today, again, is too risky, too concentrated, and with too much absentee ownership. As a result, our system of credit is seized up and also less competitive. This results in lower capital formation in our local communities, which translates into fewer jobs. Our system also has become one that does not financially empower or reward the average depositor. Consumers know that their interest on certificates of deposit have fallen to all-time lows. Yet we see banking fees increasing on all kinds of transactions. Yes, it almost seems like you have to pay the banks to take your money. Money center banks, meanwhile, are earning huge profits while tightly restricting loans and hindering our economic recovery. The U.S. has far fewer banks and savings and loan institutions than we did a decade and a half ago. In fact, the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation figures show our vast nation has only 6,414 commercial banks today, half the number that existed in 1990. In addition, 856 banks are on the FDIC's watch list, a very high figure. Moreover, 60% of the savings institutions have disappeared over the same period of time. We see enormous accumulation of banking assets and vast financial power moved to a handful of powerful institutions that are making enormous profits. Indeed, the highest profits in our nation, in addition to the oil companies. 15 years ago, the assets of the 6 largest banks were approximately 17% of gross domestic product. Today, after the recent financial panic, estimates for assets of those same banks are over half of our gross domestic product. So 6 financial institutions control an enormous percentage, not just of our banking system, but indeed our economy and in turn our nation's future. This is too much power in too few hands. The American people are feeling it in the restriction of credit, the lack of jobs with sluggish growth, and the lack of competitive capital opportunities. Over a decade ago, Congress's ultimate response to the stock market crash of 1929 was abolished. Yes, the law that had separated risky Wall Street speculation from prudent community banking, the Glass-Steagall Act, was obliterated by the Conference Committee on the Gramm-Leach-Bliley Act. That legislation became law and created an economic time bomb that started ticking and contributed in a major way to the economic explosion in September 2008. Financial abandon replaced prudence. Wall Street and its supporters in Congress became obsessed with stripping away all the prudent banking rules that were once the cornerstone of what had been a stable financial system. That system formed capital, protected consumer accounts, paid them a decent return on their money, and created the greatest period of growth in American history. That system built confidence, dependability, and wealth across our economy. Wall Street lobbyists were eager to walk back the hands of time, falsely claiming the Banking Act of 1933 that had formed the basis of stable credit for half a century was quaint and outdated. But when Gramm-Leach-Bliley was signed into law, the protections that had separated prudent banking from risk were swept into the dustbin, and financial calamity followed. The Glass-Steagall protections are not outdated. Wall Street opposed them in the 1930s just as much as they do today. In the 1930s, it was the Pecora Commission, and we need another one, that was an instrument of this Congress that was charged with investigating Wall Street abuses in the banking system following the Great Depression. Their work is often credited with creating the momentum for passage of the Glass-Steagall Banking Act of 1933, and Pecora himself wrote that bitterly hostile was Wall Street to the enactment of those regulatory reforms. What is different today is how tamely Congress and the executive branch reacted to Wall Street abuse. Following the 2008 economic collapse, there was not an immediate recognition that what was needed was restoration of that sound financial framework. Mr. Speaker, I have a bill, H.R. 1489, the Return to Prudent Banking Act. I ask my colleagues to co-sponsor this bipartisan legislation. America surely needs to restore a secure, dependable, and prudent banking system so we can get on with the job of job creation. I yield back my remaining time.
Gentlelady's time expired. Gentlelady yields back. Chair now recognizes the gentlelady from Missouri, Ms. Hetzler, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Every day we hear of some new government overreach coming from Washington. Well, today I want to tell you about perhaps the biggest overreach of all, centered around a pristine, beautiful place in my district, the Lake of the Ozarks. The Lake of the Ozarks was built in the 1930s and includes over 1,100 miles of shoreline. It's home to thousands of homes and residents and tens of thousands of Americans who enjoy the beauty and the lifestyle of living on the lake. Every day you'll find families and people of all ages enjoying the water and being with each other surrounded by God's beauty in the Ozark Hills. In the spring, we enjoyed a dogwood festival there when the hillsides are dotted with the whites and the pinks of the dogwood amidst the lime green background of budding trees. In the fall, the hills are ablaze with the colors of autumn. There's something special about seeing it all from a boat on the lake, pulling up to one of the many marinas and restaurants to grab a bite to eat on the water, and then head back home as the sun sets over the water and the sky changes from orange to blue to star-studded. The lake is a special place, and it is under attack. It is under attack from the federal government. This summer, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission issued an order requiring the removal of over 4,000 what they call encroachments from around the shoreline of the lake, including over 1,200 homes. Think about that. The federal government has ordered the removal and destruction of over 1,200 homes, all that have free and clear title to their property and have been paying property taxes on them for decades. It's shocking, it's outrageous, it's infuriating, and it's got to be stopped. You ask, how did this happen? The Lake of the Ozarks is a privately owned lake owned by Ameren UE. Power is generated from a hydroelectric plant at the lake's dam. FERC regulates the power plant and required Ameren to submit a shoreline management plan as part of a 40-year lease application for the continued operation of Bagnell Dam and the Osage Renewable Energy Center. Ameren submitted the paperwork over 2 years ago, and after sitting on the application for over 2 years, this July, FERC rejected their plan and substituted their own plan, which includes an order requiring Ameren to remove as many as 4,000 out-of-compliance structures near the shoreline and within the boundary of the Bagnell Dam project. Here's an example of some of the structures they say need to go. FERC stated the structures, quote, should be removed in a timely manner and the site restored to pre-existing conditions. This ludicrous order could result in the unnecessary removal of thousands of homes and other structures along over 1,100 miles of shoreline. What makes this action so onerous is that the property owners have clear title to this land with an easement giving them the right to do with their property as they wish. The deeds issued in the 1930s when the lake was built also reserved a right for the landowners to utilize the lakeshore and adjoining underwater land for any and all purposes, including, quote, the erection and maintenance of improvements thereon. FERC's order is nothing more than a public taking, and it needs to be stopped. If it's not, it'll be devastating to our area's economy, home values, businesses, and most importantly, devastating to the wonderful, hard-working people who have invested their life savings to live, raise a family, and retire at Missouri's beautiful Lake of the Ozarks. The Lake of the Ozarks is one of the most popular tourist destinations not only in Missouri, but across the nation. It has homeowners from all 50 states of the Union. FERC's action could cause irreparable harm to the homeowners, boating to fishing, water sports, and other business interests. It will cause uncertainty and fear that property values will plummet and has already locked up the real estate market at the lake. FERC's actions are causing the whole lake community to suffer economically. Economic downturn will lead to delays in much-needed infrastructure repairs and will hurt schools, which depend on property taxes to provide our children with the quality education they deserve. The Federal Energy Regulatory Commission is a prime example of out-of-control government agency. It must be stopped. That's why, on Monday, I introduced H.R. 3244. This bill will remove FERC's power to tell landowners that they must remove structures from around the lake. I was joined by all of the other Missouri members of the House of Representatives, 5 other Republicans and 3 Democrats. Our 2 U.S. Senators, 1 Republican and 1 Democrat, introduced an identical bill in the other chamber. This is a rare show of bipartisanship these days, which just shows how indefensible FERC's actions are. We may disagree on other issues, but on this one, we are united. Washington's overreach must be stopped. It's time to put the genie back in the bottle and ensure it doesn't wreak havoc on our lives, our lake, and our rights. Mr. Speaker, I yield back.
Gentlelady's time has expired. The chair now recognizes the gentlelady from California, Ms. Roy Allard, for 5 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, as National Breast Cancer Awareness Month comes to a close, I rise to honor our breast cancer warriors who are bravely battling this deadly disease. According to the American Cancer Society, approximately 2.6 million women and men are living with breast cancer in this country. It is estimated that this year alone there will be 290,000 new cases of breast cancer, and almost 40,000 patients will lose their battle with this disease. Until 5 years ago, I would hear these statistics, sympathize with personal stories of suffering from this tragic disease, and reaffirm my commitment to support finding a cure. But I never fully understood what it meant to have a family diagnosed with breast cancer until the day my sister Lillian called to tell me she had breast cancer. At that moment, I fully understood the personal sense of helplessness, anguish, and disbelief that had been described to me so many times before. Now I too found myself hoping and praying that I would wake up from the nightmare that was my sister's reality. Like so many other breast cancer warriors, Lillian bravely confronted her cancer, determined to overcome her devastating illness and the intensely physical and deeply emotional challenge it presented. As my sister moves towards her 5th year free of cancer, there is much to be hopeful for. From 1998 to 2007, breast cancer incidence rates in the U.S. decreased by about 2% a year, due in part, it is thought, to the reduced use of hormone replacement therapy. Since about 1990, death rates from breast cancer have also been declining, with larger decreases in women younger than 50. While breast cancer is still the 2nd leading cause of death in women, exceeded only by lung cancer, the chance that breast cancer will be responsible for a woman's death has been reduced 1 in 36. These dramatic improvements in life expectancy are believed to be the result of earlier detection through screening and increased awareness, as well as improved treatment. These improvements also stand as a testament to the investments Congress has made in prevention, screening, and researching new treatments for the disease. But they must not be the final frontier in our efforts to make breast cancer a disease of the past. I was recently and personally reminded of this fact because once again breast cancer has attacked someone who is close to my heart. Earlier this summer, Monica, my longtime district office manager, was diagnosed with invasive breast cancer. She faced this unbelievable challenge with characteristic grace and strength. With family, friends, and colleagues, she has been upfront and upbeat about her illness and always a stylish dresser. She has donned a number of very fashionable headscarves. After first undergoing several months of chemotherapy, last Friday, Monica had successful surgery and is home recovering. I want her to know we are praying for her continued strength and speedy recovery. Like so many other breast cancer warriors, Monica's extraordinary courage as she fights against her disease is an example of the power of the human spirit to survive, and it gives renewed fervor to my personal commitment to fight this disease. As long as women in our country face a 1 in 8 chance of developing breast cancer, we must continue to invest in improved and earlier detection of the disease, better treatments, and educational outreach. For Lillian, for Monica, and for my colleague who is here, Debbie Wasserman Schultz, and for all our mothers, sisters, daughters, and friends, let us never abandon our fight to find a cure and finally eradicate breast cancer in our country and ultimately in the world. I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentlelady yields back. The chair recognizes the gentleman from California, Mr. McClintock, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The government's continuing failure to address our nation's gut-wrenching unemployment stems from a fundamental disagreement over how jobs are created in the first place. We're now in the 3rd year of policies predicated on the assumption that government spending creates jobs. We squandered 3 years and trillions of dollars of the nation's wealth on such policies, and they have not worked because they cannot work. Government cannot inject a single dollar into the economy until it's first taken that same dollar out of the economy. True, we see the job that's saved or created when the government puts that dollar back into the economy. What we can't see as clearly is the jobs that are destroyed or prevented from forming because government has first taken that dollar out of the economy. We see those millions of lost jobs in a chronic unemployment rate and a stagnating economy. Government can transfer jobs from the productive sector to the government sector by taking money from one and giving it to the other. That's at the heart of the President's plan to spend billions of dollars to hire more teachers and firefighters and police officers. But these temporary government jobs come at a steep price. Every dollar spent sustaining one of these jobs is a dollar taken from the same capital pool that would otherwise have been available to productive businesses to invest in creating permanent jobs. Government can also transfer jobs from one business to another by taking capital from one and giving it to the other. That's how we got Solyndra. We put $500 million at risk to create 1,100 jobs. That's $450,000 per job. Now that $500 million is gone, and so are the jobs. And who pays for these losses? Other businesses and their employees, meaning fewer jobs created. What government can do very effectively is to create the conditions in which jobs either flourish and expand or wither and disappear. When we place additional taxes on productivity, jobs disappear. The President says he only wants to tax millionaires and billionaires, but the tax increases in his so-called jobs plan actually hammer more than 75% of net small business income, at a time when we're counting on those small businesses to produce 2/3 of the new jobs that our people desperately need. That is insane. When we place additional regulations on productivity, jobs disappear. That's what we're watching in real time. Thousands of pages of new regulations from Obamacare, from Dodd-Frank, from the EPA, stifling American job creation. It's no secret why business isn't expanding. Just ask a businessman. They're scared to death of the additional taxes and regulations they may be facing in the next few years, and they're pulling back to see what happens. Ask bankers while they're not lending, you'll hear the same answer. House Republicans have laid out a comprehensive plan to revive the economy, through the same policies that worked under Ronald Reagan in the early 1980s, under John F. Kennedy in the early 60s, under Harry Truman in the mid-40s, and under Warren Harding in the early 20s. For example, the Congressional Budget Office estimates that Obamacare by itself will cost our economy a net loss of 800,000 jobs. A few weeks ago, the Natural Resources Committee received testimony that just by getting government out of the way and opening up American energy resources to development, the economy could create 700,000 jobs and $660 billion of direct revenues to the national and state treasuries. So repeal Obamacare, open up American energy resources. There is 1.5 million jobs right there at no cost to taxpayers. Now imagine doing that across all sectors of the economy. That's what Republicans are proposing to do. The fact that the President doesn't even recognize this as a jobs plan leads me to conclude that he simply doesn't understand how jobs are created in the first place. When Ronald Reagan inherited an even worse economy from Jimmy Carter, he reduced the tax and regulatory burdens that were crushing the economy, just as Republicans propose to do today. According to a recent article in the Wall Street Journal, if the economy today under Obama had tracked the same as it did under Reagan, 15.7 million more Americans would be working today, and per capita income would be $4,000 higher than it is today, $16,000 higher for a family of four. Mr. Speaker, freedom works. It's time we put it back to work. Yield back.
Gentleman's time has expired.